probably see ever, let alone this year. So Eric, Couch, please give us a second.
So let me tell you about the call that changed my life. Son, I need your help. I instantly knew something was wrong. I'm like, Dad, is that you? What's going on? Are you okay? I can't make the thoughts stop. If it was just once or twice, I'd shake it off, but it's constant. I need help now. I spent 2 hours on the phone, desperately trying to get someone to help us. He's on the far other side of the state. And asking, begging for help, because I'm worried that I'm going to lose my dad today. 2 days later, the doctor said, we'll release him under one condition, that he never returns to his condo, and that he move in with you immediately. What they didn't know is I've been estranged from my dad much of my life. But all of that changed the second Alzheimer gets involved, and depression sets in, and people become suicidal. But the wild thing is, with a baby, you get 9 months to prepare. Yet our world changed in an instant. He moved in. And the day I get home with Dad, Catherine has to take off because she goes with my sister to work, clean up Dad's condo. So I've got Dad, I've got our kids, I'm trying to run our business, and Dad's on anxiety at a scale of 10. He's at a 20, right? He wakes up anxious. He's asking me 100 times a day, do you have those pills? Because in the hospital they had given him Ambien and he hadn't slept in months. So he's asking me 100 times a day, yet the doctors didn't prescribe it, and I couldn't get into a doctor for over 2 weeks. 24/7, he's at my side. He caught the kitchen on fire. He flooded the bathroom. He's waking up all night long, opening doors, setting off the alarm, and I'm home trying to take care of him 24/7, the kids in the business. I start having panic attacks, trying to take care of someone I spent a lifetime trying to avoid. So when I tell you that caregiving is not for the faint of heart, believe me. And let me tell you, my wife is a saint. See, I'm at work all day. But she's cooking, she's cleaning, she's driving him to doctor appointments, 4-hour doctor's appointments. She cleans him up when he messes himself. And yet one day, he hits her. He hits my wife because he didn't want to get up out of bed and take a shower that day. And they tell you, this is just part of the disease. But you know what, that doesn't make it any easier. It makes it hard, it's brutal. But I'm so grateful that we got that time with him. I wouldn't wish this stuff on my worst enemy. Yet the time was great. We spent 3.5 years caring for him in our home. We laughed, we cried, we fought, and we healed. But we were together, and family takes care of family. I can tell you that every 68 seconds, someone's diagnosed with Alzheimer's. That the U.S. government pays for 70.3% of care today through Medicare and Medicaid, and they're desperately looking for a solution because there's 10,000 boomers turning 65 every day. It's getting bigger and bigger. And there's a 70% chance you'll need care if you're 65 and older. The average cost of care nationwide is $8,000 a month. In fact, one that used to sit among us, that's a dear friend of many of us, is paying almost $21,000 a month here in Dallas for round-the-clock care. So NAIFA, we've got a problem, and it's only getting bigger. So don't wait for the wheels to come off before you start to plan. See, I'm the guy who plans, right? We all are. For the last 20 plus years, I've been the guy behind the curtain providing solutions to life's financial questions, right? Got the CLTC, got the CSA, started with Christy doing long-term care and annuities. Was training up into the #1 long-term care producer in the nation. And yet, my dad, like the cobbler kids have no shoes, my dad had no plan because he wasn't willing to talk to me, and I didn't have the guts to force the discussion. And they say that those who fail to plan to fail, but if that's you, then I hope you have someone like me who will step up. But at what cost? You see, there's no dignity in having your kids bathe you and dress you, wipe your rear and clean you up, much less the cost to them, their time, their resources, their finances, their own family that they're trying to take care of, their mental and emotional health. It's a huge cost, and it's way, way more than money. I can tell you it takes a village Because there's a lot of resources out there if you know where to look. But what if there was a better way, right? What if there was a better way so that your kids could keep their child card and you could use a special government tax incentive to cover all of those things, right? So that somebody else could do the dirty work. So you could pay pennies on the dollar. And I know everybody knows the answer to this part, right? In fact, Roger's here to talk about it. I hope you all stick around. But who here has heard of the Pension Protection Act? Right? Pretty much everybody in this room has. Yet, out in the world, every person has an investment advisor, financial advisor, a tax attorney, but almost none of them have heard about the one thing that can keep them from going broke in a nursing home, that can keep them from driving their family into the ground. You know, the Pension Protection Act, you can take 10% of your nest egg and protect the other 90. You know, you can get up to 3 times leverage on your money, income tax free, and almost nobody knows about it. There's so many paths, needs, and directions. They all have a solution, but for you, there's only going to be one option. The secret is to knowing which option will work for you. You know, that's why we're all here. That's what we do every day, is help people have solutions to their financial questions. And yet my dad didn't, because we just never talked about it. You know, it's time for us to get away from being scared to talk about stuff, because people desperately need to know this. Had he planned, our story would have been wildly different. You know, the reality is we're all one call away. But please don't wait to get that call. I'd like to share with you a couple things we learned along the way being a caregiver, right? First, if possible, and not all everybody's at the same place, but give them a job. You know, maybe they loved cooking. Maybe they can't do that anymore because they set your kitchen on fire. But they can take out the trash, right? My dad would literally take out the trash and he would comb through it. He would clean it. It was the most meticulously beautiful trash you would ever see. But it gave him a sense of significance. He had something that he could contribute back. And it's huge to be able to do that. Next, be patient. They already feel like they're going crazy. They don't need us to remind them, right? Sympathy versus empathy. Sympathy is, man, I'm sorry that happened. Empathy is jumping in the hole with you, right? We don't need someone to just point and go, yeah, go that way. We need someone to walk with us. Be sensitive towards their triggers, which means you got to take the time to learn what they are. And you know, they may not always remember what's going on, but they always remember how they felt. Man, they remember. If they ask a question repeatedly, pay attention. It's a big deal to them, so you need to dig further and find out. I can tell you on the money side, be real careful talking about money, because they remember. I remember going into them, once we had to transition Dad into the facilities, going into those homes and sitting around the table at dinner and stuff with older ladies and the men that were there. And almost every one of them could tell you down to the penny how much they had left. And even more so how many months they had left. And I've never seen stats on this. But it was devastating to watch people give up the will to live because they didn't want to be a burden. And they just die. They choose to die because they don't want to be a burden. Man, we can fix that. Like, that's what we do. You know, I can't change your oil. I can't do a lot of things. I'm horrible at it. I've literally ruined a car. But I can do this. I'm really good at this. We can all do this. And if you don't know how, you've got experts that you can call. That's what we're for, right? That's what family does, is we step up. Remember that on those days that suck? Where you're just like, I'm ready to beat them. I'm so tired. I'm worn out. I haven't had a day off. And God knows how long. Remember, there's going to come a day, and just keep that in the back of your mind. They need to feel safe, loved, in control, and not a burden. Learn their anchor points. Who's that person in their life, or that thing that anchors them down, that brings them back? You know, it's amazing to hear about people playing piano, and they can't remember anything. They can't remember who their family is, but you put them at a piano, and they just start playing. It's amazing. Find out their anchor points. Realize that it takes a village. Oh man. We'd had Dad with us for 3 years. We hadn't had any help. He had no money. The year before he came to us, he had lost like 80% of his retirement accounts due to scams. He had every dadgum financial investment newsletter you could get, and some of them had him buying the same one on 3 or 4 different ones. Yet he didn't have an investment account, but he kept buying them, right? It takes a village. Don't be afraid to ask for help. So when we get in January of 2018, our daughter gets pneumonia. And the doctors are like, he cannot get pneumonia. He's 78 years old, it'll kill him. So they're like, you've got to wash your sheets and your comforters every day. Well, Reed always says bad things happen at the worst possible time. So what happens when you got to wash your sheets and comforters every day? Your washer and dryer breaks. I kid you not. And then if you've got a husband who's so overwhelmed by life, he's going to be like, well, we have a home warranty. Let's deal with that rather than buying a damn washer and dryer. So Catherine's wearing herself out, trying to make sure our daughter's okay, who we almost lost in the process, trying to make sure her father-in-law's okay, and trying to wash the stupid clothes, right? Because I was just overwhelmed and checked out. And she'd had the foresight to just do a Facebook Live and just kind of let people know, like, here's where we're at. Like, our daughter has pneumonia. You know, not everything in life has to be beautiful. When we're talking on social media, everybody thinks everybody's life's perfect. And it's okay to be vulnerable sometimes. Because we hadn't had help in 3 years. We hadn't been on a trip. We were 24/7 Dad. And she's just kind of sharing. One of our friends raised his hand. He says, I can help. And we're like, what do you mean? And he's like, Vernon's homebound, right? And it's like, he can't go anywhere and the doctor will certify that. And we were like, yeah. He's like, hospice. I was like, no, hospice is only when you're dying. He's not dying. He's a former All-American. He still does 50 push-ups and sit-ups a day. I mean, the dude's in better shape than me. No, he's not dying. They're like, no. If he's homebound, it's covered. Well, you remember I told you I've got the CLTC, the CSA. I'm trained by the #1 long-term care producer in the nation. I'm going around the country recruiting advisors and leading workshops and doing things. Nobody ever told us that hospice covered you if you weren't dying. And I remember I was sitting at Bill's office, Bill Clark right here. And I just left. I'm sitting in the parking lot. Catherine calls me. And she said, Stan and them came over today. And they said we're going to be here tomorrow. And I just started to weep. Because we were so overwhelmed. We couldn't get help for 3 years. And the next day, 8 a.m., they showed up. 5 days a week, they showered Dad. They would bathe him. They took care of his medicine. They took care of the doctors. So she didn't have 3-hour doctor's appointments where the doctor's like, you've got to go in there and clean up that mess because he destroyed our bathroom. All of that was over. It was taken care of, right? That's part of you got to laugh sometimes. But reaching out and finding out that there's other resources. You know, we talk about, well, you've got to private pay or you've got to get long-term care because if you don't, you're going to be bankrupt on Medicare and there's nothing left. And the reality is those are options, but there's another option. And if you know where to ask and if you're willing to speak up, man, there's resources. We had no idea. We had spent 3 years getting our butts kicked to find out that hospice was an option. You must be selfish. You know, they tell you on an airplane, before you get on, before you help someone else with their mask, put your mask on first. Because if you're dead, you can't help the person next to you. So you got to be selfish. You got to take time to put in yourself. And we had never done that. For 3 years, we just got beat down, burning the candle on both ends. So you got to be selfish. Take some time. And that's what hospice helped with. Because they gave us a thing called respite care. Which if you sold long-term care, you know it's in the traditional policy. Right? Respite care says, hey, you the caregiver, you get to leave town. And we're going to take care of the person that you've been taking care of. And you get to have a break. And we're like, what? This is awesome. Right? So they put Dad in a local facility that was wonderful. But the other benefit of respite care is the next point, right? How will I know when it's time? Man, how How do I know when it's time to transition from home? Because nobody wants to go to a nursing home. That's why they're like, the average stay is only 2 years. It's because you spent probably 10, 15, 20 at home, right? Because it's the last place you want to go. How do you know when it's time? And I tell you, just like when you get married and you meet someone, you'll know. You'll just know. It doesn't have to be emotional. It doesn't. You just know. Like, we've gone as far as we can go. And that's when it's time. Let's transition to whatever we're doing. Now, we ended up having to transition Dad into a facility, right? And he started off in an amazing place, and then he ran out of money, and we had to look at Medicaid, so we started doing all the spend down stuff, because I worked with guys for that for years. And then from the Medicaid place, he got in a little predicament. They gave him a shot, and that shot changed everything. And it required that he get moved into a facility, and that's where this is going to start. Call it the fall. Edmund Burke says, the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. It had been 2 weeks since I'd seen Dad. He'd been in this facility, this geriatric ward facility, trying to rehab him. And when we finally get to see him, we walk in, and my 78-year-old all-American father is slumped over in a wheelchair, like heads down like this, just slumped over. Dad, it's me, Eric. Dad, can you hear me? Dad? And Catherine steps up. She gets on her hands and knees, and she crawls up to my dad, and she looks up like this, so that he could see her as he's slumped over in the wheelchair. And it was the last thing I ever heard my dad say. You're alive. You're alive. See, for 2 weeks, he'd been so over-medicated, he hadn't had anything to drink, he hadn't had anything to eat, because he couldn't lift his head. And that wasn't their job. It was their job to give him medication, because that's what the doctor told him to do. But nobody was making sure that, and then they had the audacity to say, well, he won't eat. I'm like, how do you eat if you can't lift your head? Somebody needs to be taking authority to do that, but nobody's doing it. But when the doctor tells the nurse, you've got to give them the meds 3 times a day, you know what? They give them the meds 3 times a day. So one of the things that I want to talk to people about is that you've got to have an advocate. You've got to have someone there looking out for you. See, we were locked out. See, what I hadn't told you is, prior to him getting transferred, they were like, we need to move him into this place. And I didn't have the paperwork with me that day, and the guy's like, oh, there's an easier way. We can just have it judge ordered. I'm like, judge ordered? I don't know. He's like, it's easier that way. I'm like, okay, fine, judge ordered. That's fine with me. What I didn't understand is what judge ordered really means is you're locked out, standing behind a wall of glass, and all you can do is watch as they do whatever they want to do. There's nothing you can do to stop or really to intervene. So they just over-medicated my dad. A week later, I get a phone call. Mr. Couch, your father's fallen. We sent him to get checked out at the doctor. Okay, no big deal. I'm going to go to the hospital to check on Dad, right? What they failed to mention is that he had fallen 15 hours earlier, and they didn't really care to find out. He fell at like 5 o'clock at night, 9 a.m. the next morning. They were like, we're going to go get him checked out. When I get to the hospital, he's now in the ICU, and they're like, we're not sure if he's going to make it. He's got a subdural hematoma, which is bleeding on the brain. He's way over-medicated. He's malnourished. He's he hasn't had any liquids to drink. But what I did have is I had him out of that other facility, and I had him back in my control again. And I remember sitting there that morning, and I said, Dad, nobody will ever do this to you again. We're either walking out of here together, or I'm with you till the Lord takes you home. And I'll tell you, we didn't walk out together. But that time was some of the best time of my life, of just getting spent. I stayed with him 24/7 for almost 3 weeks. I didn't leave. I didn't work. I just focused 100% on my dad. We're now in this new ICU, and after 4 days, he was like a caged animal. He didn't sleep for 4 days. His eyes are wide open. He's mumbling the whole time incoherently. He never spoke again. Never happened. But we're now in this ICU. He hasn't slept. And one of the things that I talk to people about is, we'd been in this amazing facility, right? Before all of this happened. We're paying $9,000 a month. They were great. And yet there were issues. Then we had to spend all the money down and get to Medicaid. Obviously it wasn't ideal, but obviously there were issues. Then we end up in the ICU at one of the top hospitals in Dallas. They were amazing. They detoxed him off the meds. They rehydrated him. They got him food. And yet there were issues. It doesn't matter where they're at. We all need an advocate. We need someone looking out for us to stand up and say, I'm looking out for them. I'm going to make sure they're okay. Because that nurse is going to do what the doctor said to do. The doctor's not coming back for another week. So what's happening in between is 3 pills a day and no one making sure there's water or food eaten, right? We all need an advocate. I'm a senior advocate. That's the title that I came up with. I don't know, it's just, this is what I do. I advocated for my dad. I advocate for anybody that needs help because I got to see so much. And I want all of you guys to in fact, here's what I want to do. I want to deputize everybody in here so that when you walk out today, you're a senior advocate. So everybody raise your hand, raise your right hand. Repeat after me. I was waiting for Lane to say after me. I am a senior advocate. Okay, you're all deputized. You're all in the crowd. We need you to take part because people desperately need help. So many people died during COVID, either due to bad medication or because their anchor point disappeared. For my dad, I was his anchor point. And when you don't see them, that's where they think, I've been abandoned. You're alive, right? So we've now been in the ICU for 4 days. Dad hasn't slept. He's been just like a caged animal. They've got him tied down because he's hit people. And he's strung like an ox, right? He finally falls asleep. Finally falls asleep. And about 3 a.m., this male nurse comes in. What does he do? Flips on the light switch, walks up to Dad, checking him out, sees that there's a loose EKG lead, rips it out along with a chunk of hair, and then starts to walk off. Dad comes, wakes up swinging, except he's tied to the bed, right? And that male nurse has the gall to go, man, he's aggressive. I'm like, are you out of your mind? The guy hadn't slept in 4 days. He finally falls asleep. You rip a chunk of hair out of his chest at 3 a.m., don't say a word, and you're saying he's aggressive? Like, I almost punched the guy. I was so mad. But that's when it hit me. This disconnect that we have. That bedside manner has just dissolved and disappeared so much because we get so busy that we forget that we're dealing with humans. So as I'm sitting there, I started to just realize what's happening. And I had this idea come to mind, and I shared it with the nurses, and it changed everything. I call it the trip method. Like, don't trip someone if you're taking a trip somewhere. TRIP. T, talk. Just talk to them. It's a medically proven fact that even though somebody's non-responsive, they can still hear you. Right? So talk to them. They hear you. 2, respect. Seniors want respect. We all want respect. My dad demanded it my whole life, but he also gave it freely. I, inform. Mr. Couch, we need to give you a shot. We need to draw blood. It's going to sting a little, but we're going to count to 3, okay? It was amazing how that changed everything. And then P, 4th, is permission. Ask permission. That's part of the respect thing, right? We call it the golden rule. Do to others as you want them to do to you. So talk, respect, inform, permission. Trip. So simple. Yet when we did it, it changed everything. Prior to that, Dad had been aggressive every time. But when we started implementing that, he stopped. In fact, when they would give him shots or draw blood, he went from this aggressive, caged animal to like a 5-year-old boy that's like a trooper. He's like, oh, it hurts. But now we're a part of a team. He couldn't communicate, but clearly he understood. In fact, one morning I acted like I was asleep just to see how he would respond if I wasn't there. I'm literally like 2 feet away, laying on the couch, because I didn't leave. But when they did it, there was no response. He did exactly what we hoped. And from that day on, there were never any more of those handcuffs on him. Gandhi says the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. Now, we're all senior advocates in here, right? So everybody's been deputized. And that's what we need to do. We need to help the medical community. We need to help others. We need to help ourselves realize that we need advocates. And just talk, respect, inform, permission. Once we got Dad stabilized, we realized that he was never going to walk out of there. He was rehydrated, he was detoxed, but he never could learn to eat again. He couldn't drink again. And we realized it was time to transition to hospice. And I'll tell you, while we were in that hospital and once we transitioned to hospice, my favorite part of every day is when it was time for them to change it. You know, or to change the bed or give him a bath or something like that. Because I would get to, that one time, I'd get to reach down and I'd put my chest against his chest and I'd wrap my arms around him. And I'd give my dad a hug as I just rolled him onto his side. And for, a minute a couple times a day, I just got to hold him close. And I'd tell him how proud I was of him. And I'd tell him how much I loved getting to be his son. And we just got to share that moment. But as the time went, it became way more and more painful for him to get those hugs. Like his body would just clench up because of the pain. Because we were at the end, right? My dad's starting to pass away. And we kept waiting what was going on. So 3 years ago this last week is the end. 9:03 a.m., October 17, 2018, my dad passed away. And I remember that day vividly, about 4:30 in the morning. See, I'd slept with him every day, right? We're in the same little twin bed. I'm next to him. For the longest, he decided he didn't like being in the bed, so he's like laying across the bed with his feet on the ground. And sometimes in the middle of the night, I had to watch how he slept because, for one, I wanted to make sure he had room and he didn't fall off. So I'm like always uncomfortable. I slept maybe 1.5 hours a night. But I also had to be careful because he was still strong as an ox. And sometimes in the middle of the night, like a closed fist would come crashing down across my chest or my face or something like that. Or he would be like, have some pain and his foot would come up. So like the heel of his foot would come crashing down. Let me tell you, it hurt, right? But my job was to protect him and make sure he didn't fall out of bed. And I knew I'd be okay. But man, I was exhausted. Because every day I'm thinking this could be our last day. I don't know if this is our last day, but it could be. So I'm trying to take every moment I can. I didn't want to leave 24/7, 2.5 weeks. And I didn't want to miss his minute. And one of the things that I kept saying is, I want to see the last face I want to be the last face that he sees. Like that's my hope, that's my prayer, is that I can be the last face. And I had a couple of friends that were like, Eric, don't like put all your hopes in it. Don't make that a requirement, because sometimes they can't do it while you're in the room. They'll wait for you to fall asleep. They'll wait for you to go to the bathroom. They'll wait for something. They just can't do it while you're right there. I was like, okay. But that was my hope, right? So about 4:30 in the morning, Dad's been catatonic for 3 days. Can't move, can't even really blink, just is there. About 4:30 in the morning, I just feel a nudge. Can't explain it. And I wake up, and Dad's like looking straight at me. Eyes wide open, not blinking, looking straight there. And I knew something was up. I didn't know exactly what, but I knew something. So I'm like trying to stay awake, right? It's 4:30 in the morning and 4:45, 5 o'clock, and I'm doing everything I can. I'm standing up, I'm sitting down, I'm turning on the TV, I'm singing, I'm playing music, I'm like rolling over to this side or that, still looking at him, but like I am worn out. I feel like the apostles at the Garden of Gethsemane, right? Jesus is over there sweating blood, and he's like, seriously, dudes, can you stay awake for an hour? Right? Like, I am doing everything I can, and I am so exhausted, and I'm so worn out from 3 weeks of thinking this could be the day, and there's just nothing left. And I'm just waiting for one more moment. I'd also been waiting because the doctor said you'll know when we're getting time, because he'll start getting these purple dots all over, right? It's called mottling. And I'd seen it on his feet, I'd seen it on his knees and stuff like that. Catherine would come in every morning and massage his feet, and you'd see it just kind of dissipating, and everything would be better. But it just, I'm looking for that. And about 5:30 in the morning, I'm like, Dad, I'm really tired. Can we just take a nap for a little while? And I just closed my eyes and I slept for about an hour and a half. 7 a.m., the nurses show up. And there's a change, and they're starting to move around. So I wake up, and I'm moving around, and I'm looking at Dad, and Dad's still, nothing's changed since 4:30 a.m. He's right there, and he's looking straight at me. So I'm looking at him. And Catherine shows up. She brings some breakfast, and she rubs on Dad's feet, and she tells him, has just a sweet moment with him. And then she has to leave. And about 8:30, I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to the bathroom real quick. I'm going to wash my face off. So as I'm heading, which is in the same room, the nurse walks in. And, 30 seconds, a minute later, I'm like, hey, I gotta, go back in there. So I'm walking back in, and it says, I'm walking back in the room. Without looking at me, the nurse says, it's happening. So I don't say a word. I just go straight over, get in next to Dad, and I look at him, and as I look at him, I see that his whole body's turning purple. Like his head's purple, his neck's purple, his chest is purple, his arms are purple, like everything's turning purple. And I realized, man, we're here. So I just put my hand on his head as I'm laying there, and I'm just kind of stroking his head. And he's got his hand on his chest, so I put my hand on top of his, and I'm just holding it with my right hand here, my left hand here. And I just started praying over him, man. And I told him, Dad, I'm so grateful for these 3 weeks with you. And I'm so grateful that I get to be your son. And I've loved you. And Dad, don't worry, you'll know when it's time. I told him this a dozen times over the weeks. Dad, you'll know it's time. Because the shepherd says that sheep hear his voice. And you're a sheep. So you're going to know when it's time. And until it's time, if you wake up and you're not with the Lord, just know that we're together because I'm not leaving. Right? So I just reminded him, Dad, you'll know. And I prayed with him, and I sang with him the life of our kids. Every night we'd sing them to sleep every night. We'd pray with them, and then Catherine and I would sing. And so I did that for Dad, right? I sing Jesus Loves Me, and I sing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. We just segue from one song to the next. So I'm just doing these same songs. There's this book that we've read our kids their whole life called Love You Forever, I Like You For Always. As long as I'm living, my baby will be, and I said my daddy will be. And then there's a song that Catherine wrote when our kids were little that we always finish with. Good night, sleep tight, I love you. Good night, sleep tight, my dear. For God is watching over you. So good night, sleep tight, my dear. And there was this peace that surpasses understanding. And we sat there for a minute, and as we were sitting there, that's when I realized that my hand was on top of Dad's hand. See, for the last week, I had to always have my hand under his because if I touched him, he was in excruciating pain, and his whole body would convulse. And that's when I realized that I was touching his hand, and I felt such guilt because I knew I had to be hurting him. So I started to move my hand off of his. And I can't explain it, but there was just this nudge, this like a magnet. It just said, don't move. Hold on, son, it's okay. Just stay right there. I was like, okay, Dad. And I just had my hand on his head, and I had my hand on his hand, and I just looked at him. And about 3 seconds later, he took his last breath. We just laid there. I just took in the moment. I don't tell people that story a lot. Ever, really. Because those are final moments where you hold on to. You think about the hugs, and you think about the rolling them into your chest. You know, I remember Catherine kept coming in. She kept saying, you know, the Lord told me this is a gift. And I didn't understand that. You know, I was grateful that the Lord gave us this chance to connect, to reconnect, because we had so much baggage. We'd been estranged for years. And I wouldn't wish this stuff on my worst enemy, but I would wish the results for everybody that they could have that. But she kept saying, you know, the Lord's told me that this is a gift. And I'm like, how is this a gift? How's watching my dad die a gift? He should have lived another 10 years. He's doing 50 push-ups a day, and these people killed him. Like, how is that a gift? I don't get it. This doesn't make sense. And I remember a birthday card that he'd just given me, and it said the same as it always said, right? He always said one time we were together, I love you. And he always said, let's go play golf. Dad was always like, can we play golf? Say, hey son, let's go play golf. Let's play golf. Really what he's saying is, son, can we just have some time together? Can we just spend some time together? And I'm like, man, I'm busy. I'm trying to work. I'm being a dad. I'm a caregiver. I've got the business. I don't have time, especially for someone who wasn't there for me when I was a kid. I mean, I want to. I mean, right? Like, I want to go with it. And it's just, there's other stuff. But for that 2.5 weeks, those 24 hours a day, I focused exclusively on him. And I finally figured out that was the gift. Right? She kept saying there's a gift. The gift was time. My dad had always wanted time. He'd always wanted time together. Can we play golf? Can we hang out? Right? As we get older, we realize what's most important. And for those 2.5 weeks, all I did, 100% of my time, was focused on him. But at the same time, I was like, why is he still here? Like, I didn't get it yet, right? While I'm with him. So I'm like, maybe there's someone he needs to make amends to. Maybe there's an issue here or something like that. So I call in everybody. See, what I hadn't told you is when Catherine went to see Dad and to clean up his apartment, she sees this wall full of sticky notes. And she doesn't ever like to talk about it. But Dad had an entire wall of regrets where he had handwritten notes of all the things that he was ashamed of and that he had said and that he had done, the guilt that he had. So those 2.5 weeks while we're there, like I'm calling everybody I know. It's like, because he shouldn't be alive. He hasn't had food in over 2 weeks. In fact, September 29th, actually September 11th, and he died on October 18th. September 11th is the last time I know he had a meal, because in my wallet, I carried the receipt of going to Whataburger because he was in ICU. And again, they hadn't told him to feed him, so they hadn't fed him. And I was like, why haven't you fed him? And they're like, well, because he doesn't say to. So I would have got him a Whataburger. He ate every single bite, right? But I'm trying to make amends, and I'm calling everybody in. I mean, even after a week after everybody had come in to make amends with him, he's still alive. And I'm like, this doesn't make sense. He shouldn't be alive. He hasn't eaten. He hasn't had anything to drink. Why is he alive? What's he holding on for? We've gotten everybody. He's made amends with everybody. And that's when it finally hit me. He was waiting for me. Like I was the final amends, right? And that's what he wanted, was that time. And the Lord gave us the gift of time. And it was so great. Dad didn't want to miss a minute. And he's purple head to toe. And the Lord gave us every second. You know, when there was 10 minutes, 5 minutes, the Lord gave it to us. 2 minutes, 1 minute, 30 seconds, 10 seconds. You know, they say, suck the marrow out of life. Take everything you can. And that's what we had. His body was just shutting down. There wasn't anything left. And yet we got every single moment we could. Because that was our gift. And friends, that's what I want to encourage all of us. Is realize we've got a gift today. We've got a gift of time. And it's a limited resource. You don't have that much time in life. So we've got to take advantage of it. we've got to take advantage of the time we have today with those you love. Spend time with them. I know there's work. Right? We all have work to do. But I remember going to Danny's office one day. He's gracious enough to see me every couple of years. I'll give him a call, and I'll go over, and we'll sit at his desk, and we'll talk. And Danny's like, you own your company, right? Yes, sir. He's like, you take your kids to school and pick them up every day? No, sir. Well, you should. It's important. And I'm like, well, I'm working, so Catherine takes them. But he was right. You were right. So what did I do? Starting that afternoon, I picked up our kids. I took them to school. Every day I'd pick up Evan from school. How was your day? And I'd hear about it. And Emily. Because it's important to spend time with those you're around. Work can wait. Hug your kids and your spouse. Say you're sorry. Tell them I'm grateful. Tell them I love you. Make amends. Say thank you, because time is precious. And don't waste a moment. We all have an opportunity right now, today. So the question I want to ask you is, what if this was the last year of your life, and you knew 365 days from today, I'm not going to be around anymore? What would you do with it? Who would you talk to? Where would you spend your time? What would you do? What would you eliminate so that you can focus on what's important? Because our time is so precious. And with that, what I would encourage you to do is go. 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 Take advantage of those moments in life and those precious times with those you love. Thank you.